we were all cut off from radio contact, and for a few minutes, and they apparently could listen in.
Yes.
And I think it was Buzz Aldrin who actually stepped onto the moon, one small step for man, that kind of thing.
No, it was Armstrong.
Armstrong, was it?
Neil Armstrong.
But apparently, when they get there, he said, "What the hell's going on? What are all these lights doing here?" Now,
very strange.
Then they go on to talk about disappearances of animals and things. And apparently in the 70s, there was a big thing about donkeys on Dartmoor. Were found 20 or 30 of them with all broken limbs in the middle of Dartmoor. They couldn't explain it.
Yes.
And apparently we are cleverer than we make out, because have had bases on the moon for quite some time, according to this book.
Human beings, you mean?
Yes. And we take animals onto the moon, and apparently there was a problem with this particular lift-off, if you like, and these things crashed to the ground.
You didn't pay any money for this book, did you, David? David, we're going to move on. It's an interesting theory. Peter's in Northampton. Peter, good morning. You're on Talk Radio UK.
Good morning, Scott. I'm sorry, I don't know your guest name.
Rodney Davies.
Rodney, good morning, Rodney.
Good morning.
Two things really very quickly. I remember a few years ago, in fact, when I say a few years ago, probably in excess of 35 years ago now, thereabouts, seeing a film produced by the Moody Institute in America.
Yes.
Which was one of these science. They used to produce some films called Faith and Fact, which argued the Christian faith, but from a logical science point of view.
Yes.
In this particular film, one thing which interested me was they showed a man, they had a room with big sort of electrodes coming down from the ceiling, and one of these lightning machines that produces something like 1,000,000 volts. And a guy held a big stick up, and they turned the thing on, and the stick caught fire.
Yes.
They then, the guy took his shoes and socks off, stood on this dome and put metal finger caps on his fingers, and they then altered the tuning of the electricity so that it was out of phase with his body, but still 1,000,000 volts. And then the guy stood there, and there was all this lightning, and there's 1,000,000 volts passed through his body, and he came down unharmed. And what they were arguing was that basically we're all made up of atoms and electrons at the most fundamental. And the thing which enables us as a race and enables everything on our world to be seen and to interact is the fact that we're all in phase. So when I sit on a chair, which is also made up of electrons, I don't fall through it because my body is in phase with that which I'm sitting on.
Yes, yes.
And they were arguing that it would be completely possible for a whole other universe to exist simply out of phase with us.
Yes, I quite agree.
And that we could now, I mean, you're sitting there in Oxford Street in the studios of Talk Radio UK, but
my other self is, yes.
Yes, but you could be at the same time sitting in the fast lane of a highway in a completely other world, which was out of phase with our own.
Oh, my brain's starting to hurt here, Peter. My brain is starting to hurt.
Well, that's the interesting theory that they put forward. Okay, and you mentioned teleportation or translocation,
yeah.
And it might be interesting. Did you know that? I mean, there are several instances of it in the Bible.
There certainly are.
And there's one in the Acts of the Apostles.
Yes, there is.
When Philip,
that's correct,
was talking to a eunuch, and the eunuch was converted. And when they came up out of the water, it says, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch didn't see him again.
Suddenly teleported
That's
or
right,
translocated about 35 miles.
That's right. Philip appeared at Azotus.
Correct,
and
yes.
So, you know, these sort of instances are recorded in all kinds of places, including the Bible.
Oh, yes, the occurrences of this sort have a very long history, and I have looked back over the past 2,000 years. I've gone back as far as I started off the book in the 7th century BC and have come forwards to modern times.
What's the most recent telelocation or translocation or teleportation or translocation or bilocation that you've documented in your book?
Okay, well, one of the most recent bilocations happened to this same aunt I was mentioning earlier. She was at home, and her partner she was waiting for her partner to come back home from work, which he usually got home at about 6:15 in the evening. And she had dropped off to sleep in the afternoon and suddenly woke up at about 5:30 to hear him come into the room and talk to her, and she saw him walking across the room towards her. And he said, "Oh, dear, aren't I glad to be home, dear, that drive. Won't I be glad when I retire?" And he came right over to her and gave her a kiss on the cheek. And she said, "My goodness, I didn't expect you home quite yet. You go and get changed, and I'll pour you a drink and turn the oven on and do the things that she normally did with regards to getting the meal prepared." He turned from her, left the room, and she thought that he went into the bedroom to get changed. And then 10 minutes or so went by, and she didn't hear anything further from him, and she called out, "Nigel, where are you?" And no reply. And so she went and looked in the bedroom, nobody there. Looked in every other room of the house, nobody there. Went outside to look for his car, wasn't there. Then she suddenly looked at the clock and saw it was now 20 to 6, and thought, well, it's impossible for him to be home at that time anyway. Because of the traffic, he never gets home before 6:15 at the earliest. And then he eventually arrived home at about 6:15.
Don't tell me he went through the same routine again. "Hello, dear, I was looking forward to retiring."
I don't think probably a similar sort of conversation took place, but not the identical words. So in some way, he had managed, quite spontaneously, to duplicate himself while he was in fact in rush hour traffic on his way home.
He purposely did this?
No, he didn't purposely. It just spontaneously happened. He had no awareness of what was happening.
Well, what's the purpose of this, though, Rodney?
There was a spiritual purpose with regards to Mary of Agreda.
Yes.
Sometimes when people duplicate themselves in this manner, the purpose seems to be to tell them, if they're a guest who is somebody who is on a journey, particularly a long journey, and people are worried about them, sometimes the duplicate can be sent ahead to warn the people who are waiting, or to show the people that they are waiting for them that they are on their way.
I take it these teleportations are getting less frequent now because you've got the mobile phone. You can just call and say, "I'm stuck in traffic, darling."
Yes, because they tended to take place particularly in remote areas with difficult terrain, where there were no telephones and it was impossible to communicate in other ways.
Now, this was a family teleportation or translocation.
The one I just talked about regarding my aunt.
Yes. But how was that, Doctor? I mean, how do you know?
Well, this is what my aunt told me happened to her.
Right, okay.
That she saw her partner, and she not only saw him, but she spoke to him, so he was conscious of what he was saying, or the double was,
yes.
And he had a discernible solidity.
Yes, when he kissed her. Now, does he know about this? Did he know about this?
No, he had no idea that this had happened.
Right, okay.
And the funny thing about the double, I mean, this is why that particular case is a little unusual, because you get all sorts of variations in this duplication. One of the most interesting cases, which I also discuss in the book, involved a teacher at a school in Latvia in the middle of the 19th century, a lady called Emily Segay, who spontaneously produced a duplicate on many occasions, witnessed by the pupils and all the staff. And the strange thing about her duplicate was that it wasn't conscious, so it couldn't answer questions or appear to respond as to what was going on around it. And it couldn't be seen by the teacher herself. So if you imagine a second me suddenly appeared sitting in this chair beside me.
I wouldn't be here much longer, Rodney, I tell you that.
Which you could see, but I couldn't.
Yes.
That was the situation that she was in. And of course several of the students fainted when the double appeared.
Right. Let's rattle through a couple more calls. Patricia's in Manchester. Patricia, morning, you're on Talk Radio UK.
Oh, good morning.
Hi,
just a quick couple of points I'd like to put to you.
Good morning, Patricia.
Oh, sorry, good morning. I'm a bit nervous. Under certain circumstances, as human beings, we hallucinate. If you take LSD, or if you're very ill and you've got a temperature or whatever.
Yes.
So what's to say that at some point chemicals build up in our body and suddenly get released naturally and cause us to hallucinate?
Yes.
Yeah. And the other point is, if they are visitors from another planet or whatever, why are they coming here?
Well, we're not actually talking about visitors from another planet at the moment, Patricia.
Right, sorry.
No, that's fine, that's right.
But
I'll tell you what, we might...
I agree. What are they doing to us if they are come from another planet?
You taught in Bermuda at one stage when you were a zoologist.
Yes.
Bermuda Triangle, is that anything that you've covered in your...
It's on the edge of the Bermuda Triangle.
Yes, but...
I have read about a number of disappearances.
You haven't investigated?
Not specifically, because it's been written about so many times that...
Have you got a theory?
No, I wouldn't say I have a particular theory. Some interesting disappearances have happened there. I could talk about one in particular, which is...
How brief can we be? Because we've got lots of... The switchboard's full.
Well, it involved a whole boat called the Island Queen.
And?
Which was sailing between two ports, a distance of about 75 miles. And during that voyage, the boat and all the passengers and crew on board completely vanished. The weather was fine throughout the time that the boat was journeying and remained fine for several days afterwards. It was also accompanied by a sister vessel who overtook it en route and last saw it at about midnight. It was a night voyage, but the boat didn't turn up in the morning where it should have done. They both docked in the same port. And a big rescue search was mounted, which overflew and boats visited the same area, but nothing of the vessel was found at all. No wreckage whatsoever. No bodies floating in the sea, no bodies were ever washed ashore, no oil patches or anything at all, or bits of loose material from the boat. Nothing whatsoever was found. And it's a completely unexplainable disappearances. One of the most mysterious of all time, in fact. I put it in the book because I say it is possibly a supernatural disappearance. I rather suspect it is, but it's certainly a disappearance of great mystery.
And the year was?
The year for that was 1944.
Right. Now, when you say supernatural, when you refer to something as supernatural disappearance, there's nothing religious
no.
about that.
I'm only calling them supernatural disappearances when they are either witnessed or a disappearance takes place that cannot seemingly be explained in any other way. I'll give you one very quick example of an ancient disappearance, which is quite a dramatic one. It involves a boxer, a Greek boxer, who went to the Olympic Games to compete in the boxing event. His name was Clairvoyance. He got to the final, but unfortunately he was a bit of an impetuous boxer, and he threw a foul punch and accidentally killed his opponent, called Icarus. And he was disqualified and sent back in disgrace to his island. And of course he wasn't welcomed at all happily by his fellow islanders who'd sent him there and was expecting much of him. And something in this boxer's mind snapped, because not long afterwards he went to a local school and pushed down one of the pillars supporting the roof, and it collapsed onto the students and killed about 60 of them. And the grief-stricken parents decided to kill him. They went after him and were going to stone him to death. And the boxer ran for sanctuary into the temple of Athene. And to make double sure he'd be safe there, he climbed into a big chest in the temple and pulled the lid down from inside and held it down so powerfully, because he was a very powerful man, that they couldn't pull it open. So they sent for axes. They hacked the chest open, only to find that it was completely empty. And Clairvoyance was never seen or heard of again.
Right. Vera's in Coventry. Vera, good morning. You're on Talk Radio UK. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. What's your story, Vera?
Okay. Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, I went to a pottery class. My second week it was. And
Yes.
the place was held, it was part of the Polychester College here, but it was in an old building. And whilst I was there, I said to my friend who was sitting next to me, he doesn't look very pleased with us. And I looked up, and there was a man standing there,
Yes.
with his hands clasped behind his back, and he looked very puzzled and almost annoyed. I didn't realise until afterwards this, but he was in a very old-fashioned tweed suit, waistcoat and watch chain. And my friend looked up and she said, "Who?" And I said, "Oh, he's not there." It was an ordinary man, flesh and blood. It didn't frighten me.
Yes.
But a lady who was a regular student, she said, "What was he like?" And I described him. When you go out, she said, have a look at the door, because it's a very old building. It used to be a chapel, and there were a lot of plaques on the door. And I looked, and one of them was J.K. Starley. Now, he was the man who built the first bicycles in Coventry.
Oh, yes.
And I remembered that was him, because my grandfather showed me as a child a monument to him in our local park.
Oh, good Lord. So his ghost had actually appeared in behind you.
And he was looking as much as to say, what on earth are they doing here? That's what I felt. His hands were clasped behind his back.
Did you get to speak to him?
Oh, no, he'd gone. By the time I said to my friend, he doesn't look very pleased with us, and she said, who? And behind was a wall.
Yes.
So he couldn't have gone that way. But it was an old-fashioned... I didn't realise until afterwards it all happened so quickly. So it was an old-fashioned clothes.
As you turned to your friend, he apparently vanished from behind you,
That's
did he?
right.
I see.
This has been published in our local paper.
Well, I'm not surprising. A fascinating experience.
Thank you, Vera. Sheila's in Hereford. Sheila, good morning. You're on Talk Radio UK.
Hello,
hello, Sheila.
Oh, hello.
Hello, Sheila. What's your story?
I haven't it. You were talking about...
It's because your story's so relevant.
Oh, I see. You were talking about producing doubles.
Yes, bilocation.
My mother died 6 years ago, and I was nursing her, and this happened a year or two before then.
Yes.
She was in bed, and she opened her eyes, and I was standing by her fully dressed. And she spoke to me.
Yes.
Then, after a moment or two, she thought I was very quiet, and she got up and came to see me, and I was fast asleep in bed.
So you were in bed at one place, Sheila.
I was in bed, fast asleep.
Yes.
And my mother saw me by her and spoke to me.
Oh, I see.
In the same house.
Dressed.
In the same house, Sheila.
Oh yes, it's just the next door room.
Right.
That's very interesting, Sheila. And so you have had a personal experience of being duplicated yourself.
I also think I met myself once.
Good Lord.
Tell us about that.
Yes, do.
Well, this is rather peculiar. This was in Devon. I'm a hospital almoner, and we were having a hospital garden party, garden fete. And suddenly I met somebody. I said, oh, how lovely to see you. And we rushed at each other, and then a second thought, oh, but I don't know you. And we both turned away to the right, and I looked for this person. I never saw her again. But when I think about it, she was dressed in a very similar fashion to myself. I was wearing a grey costume.
But you didn't recognise yourself, though?
Well, I don't think you do, because, you never see yourself. You're only a mirror image, aren't you?
Sheila, you know I'm an awful old cynic. Mirror springs to mind.
Yes, you only see a mirror image of yourself, so you don't really ever recognise yourself. You never see yourself properly, do you?
But I will say this, Sheila, at the end of my book, I have put in a request for people who have had experiences of supernatural disappearances or appearances to write to me, care of the author, because I'm doing research into as many modern current examples of this as I can. So if you'd like to write in this account you've just mentioned, I would be very, very happy to receive it.
Your name and address have only just come in and switched on the radio.
That's right. Before the end of the programme, Sheila, just before 12 o'clock, we'll give Rodney's the name of his book and how you can get in touch with Rodney.
But also, articles are always disappearing and reappearing.
Oh goodness!
Well, I've got a 5.5-inch glass magnifier that I've got in my hand on the dining room table. It was there, and I saw it partly covered by paper. Then I went to use it, and it wasn't there. 3 weeks later, I found it in the garden under a sage bush, and I only happened to move the sage bush to move some weeds.
Ah, my goodness. So it had disappeared from the house and then appeared in the garden.
Reappeared in the garden.
Yes, and there are many examples of this happening. Very interesting, Sheila.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you for calling.
Let's talk to Maureen in Reading. She's got a fascinating story. Maureen, hello. You're on Talk Radio UK.
Hi.
Hello, Maureen.
This happened when, towards the end of the last war, my father was in France.
Yes.
And he wrote every day to my mother.
Yes.
And he put all the letters in one envelope, and they always came through the door with a plop, big envelope. And he never missed. And she hadn't had a letter from him for weeks, and she was really worried.
Yes, understandably.
And she was just sat in her chair thinking about him on this particular day. And he just appeared to her, and he was climbing a ladder. And he said, don't worry. And the next day, she got this letter, with all the letters in, obviously. And it said, that he was starting the rebuilding program.
Good Lord.
Helping.
So he would have been using a ladder in the course of his work, I suppose. That's what he means. And that's a fascinating example of duplication too, Maureen. Very, very interesting.
But it happened to my mother quite a lot, and it's also happened to me.
Oh, it happened on more than one occasion?
Oh, yes.
Did it? Involving your father?
Not always, no. Different members of the family.
How's it happened? Give us one of your experiences, Maureen.
My experiences are to do mainly with one of my sisters and my eldest daughter. We're very close, and obviously there's this... It's like radio waves, really.
Are you uncomfortable talking about it?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Right, give us an experience.
I can... When my eldest daughter goes anywhere, not all the time, but some of the time, I can actually describe what she's looking at. It's like looking at something through her eyes.
Yes. This is a sort of psychic link you have with her, I would say.
Obviously, yes.
Yes.
Maureen, stay tuned, because if you think that this hour is spooky enough, next hour is going to be just as spooky, because we're going to be talking with a psychic. Supposedly the crash of spacecraft at the Air Force Base Roswell in 1947, was it?
Yes, I think so. Somewhere around there.
But let's first go to Cleveland and talk to Tony. You're on Talk Radio UK, Tony.
Hello, Scott.
Hello.
Yeah,
hello.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just listening to your program, just an experience. Well, I don't know if I had or didn't. I usually go, when I was working at a certain site, I used to walk to work every morning.
Yes.
For about 8 to 10 months. And anyway, this morning, it was a Saturday morning. I was supposed to be at work.
Yes.
And I was at home, actually. And when I got to work the next day, a few of the guys at work said, I stopped for you to give you a lift in the car, and you just ignored me and walked straight on. But it wasn't just like one person, it was like 2 or 3 persons.
Yes.
So I was like...
who had apparently seen a duplicate of yourself.
Well, wherever.
Of which you were completely unaware, which was very similar to Nigel's duplicating himself. That was my aunt's partner.
Now, hang on, Tony.
Yeah.
Now, you sound like a pretty reasonable sort of a fella.
I think I am, yeah.
Had you not thought about this until you were listening to Rodney?
Oh, no, because I thought it was like an elaborate wind-up at work.
Yes.
Yes.
But I worked with my brother-in-law, and he's, we're pretty, close. And I said to him afterwards, a couple of months later or whatever, I said, was it a wind-up that day? And he said, oh, no. He said, because they even approached him to asked him where I were,
And you were apparently dressed in your everyday working clothes?
Combat jackets and blue jeans, like my working gear.
So it was a complete replica of your normal self?
Yeah.
But all the time you're at home?
Yeah.
That's most fascinating. And as I say, if you could possibly write to me the details of this, I would be most happy to have them, because it's a very, very fascinating field. Thank you very much for calling in and telling us about it.
Yes, cheers, Tony. A shiver's gone up my spine, I have to tell you. Now, Rodney, tell us about Roswell.
Yes. The Roswell. Well, there is a film on
Channel 4 tonight.
Channel 4 tonight, which claims to show an alien being dissected, I believe.
It's a post-mortem being carried out on an alien, yes.
Well, what I would like to say is I first heard about this film 20 years ago, and the circumstances of my hearing about a film, whether it's this film, I don't know, I was introduced to a young man who was working at the Argentine consulate in Montreal by a lady who he was dating at the time. And I was writing about psychic matters then, and one of the things that came up in conversation was UFOs. And he said, well, I have a very interesting story to tell you, which involves my father, who was a high-ranking officer in the Argentine military. And he said during the early 1960s, there were a number of UFO sightings in Argentina, both, I think, by civilians and by Air Force pilots and people of that sort, people in an official capacity. And the military didn't really know what to make of them, so they apparently contacted the Americans to find out if they could give them any more information. Were they actually from another planet, or what were they? And you probably know that the Americans had been investigating UFOs, I think the Blue Book Project or something, through the 1950s and 60s. Anyhow, apparently the CIA sent a pair of investigators down to Argentina, and they gave a talk on what they knew about UFOs. And they discussed a number of incidents, but he said they also showed my father and the other officers a film. And this film showed a saucer-shaped UFO which had apparently crashed in an American desert. And he said that lying outside of the saucer was a small sort of humanoid being, which of course was preserved, I suppose. But the saucer itself, although it was damaged and put out of action, it wasn't open. There was no opening in it, and they couldn't get into it. It did have sort of windows, and they were able to look through and see that there were at least two other little men inside. But they weren't able to get, nothing would cut the metal that it was made of, so they weren't able to get into it. So presumably they weren't able then. I don't know about now, but and the small humanoid being and the whole of the flying saucer were taken off, and that was the last ever heard of them. Now I don't know whether this film is...
Before you go on, you're going to have to stay with us until after the news. Okay. We've run right out of time.
Oh.
So, right back after the news with Rodney Davies, and we'll be talking psychics. I'm not quite sure how to talk about this, but we've been talking, if you've been tuned in, we've been talking to Rodney Davies, whose book Supernatural Disappearances comes out on Thursday. Joining us in the studio now is Dyllis Gator, who's a psychic who's written a book. When's your book out, Dyllis?
I believe it was August the 31st, but it may have been put off a week.
Right, well, and we're going to be talking about the psychic phenomena, but I have to tell you that our switchboard has gone... our switchboard is doing strange things. Now, you've seen it, Dyllis, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Now, what you saw out in the control room was that we've got two coloured lights, green and red.
Yes.
And what they should do is, when people are calling in, they should flick red.
Yes.
And when people have already been spoken to and they're waiting to come to talk to us, they should be flicking green. Now, these lights are going from green. The red lights are going and the green lights are going, but they're going intermittently and at different parts of the switchboard. Now, if I can just explain, my console here in front of me, I have 8 lines, some of which are blinking red and some of which are blinking green absolutely normally. Now, the problem with this is that my console is the duplicate of the console in front of Abby, the phone producer, and now mine is normal and hers is going nuts.
So something strange.
What's happening here? What is happening here, Dyllis?
Well, if you ask my opinion on that, I can only speak for myself, of course, and I've obviously got another expert here who will have his opinion, so I don't know what he'd say, but as a psychic, I would say what I saw sitting out there, and I saw it. Energy, all psychic things, psychic activity is based on energy, and I think there was a great deal of psychic energy present here in the studio with your guest was speaking just then when I was listening. There was a great deal of electric and energy, and often that can be mischievous, and people can be shown things when they say, oh, look at this, and everyone goes mad and says, oh, isn't it weird? In fact, it is pure energy, I would say, just playing up. Or someone could have even, as with a poltergeist, not wanted it to happen, but it happened because of someone who used the energy without knowing it. Something along those lines, I would say.
Now, Abby's just sent me a message saying that she's pressed line 6, and now it's gone dead. Everything's gone dead. The other Telecaster is working, but one of them has gone dead. Now, crowded around is Nigel the engineer, Mike the producer, Gillian the assistant producer, and Abby, and none of them can figure out what has gone wrong with our phones. And this
is the first time
this has not happened before. This has never happened before.
I think
this is
astonishing.
This is not a wind-up. This is not a wind-up. I do not believe in any of this stuff, I have to say, and this is not a wind-up. But I mean, it's a hell of a coincidence. That's all I can say. Yes. Our switchboard has taken on, you know, almost a character of its own, and it is doing things that it shouldn't be doing, but it's not being replicated here on my console in the studio. So there you go. Now, Rodney. Now you have dealt with the psychic phenomena.
Yes, I have.
As well. But just before the news, the reason you're staying on is that we were talking about the Roswell incident. This is the black and white footage, part of which is going to be shown on Channel 4 tonight, supposedly of a post-mortem being carried out on an alien being or alien beings at a crash site near the Roswell Army Air Force Base in the American desert in 1947. You were relating a story where you met an Argentine diplomat in Montreal.
Well, he worked at the consulate in Montreal, the Argentine consulate, whose father had been shown a film by two CIA men who were sent specially down to Argentina to talk about UFOs and to give them what information they had about them, and they showed them a film of this flying saucer in an American desert. Now, the young Argentine man wasn't able to tell me which American desert it was. I mean, it presumably is the same desert that Roswell is in. It's the same incident. Now, whether it's the same film we're going to see tonight that his father was shown, I don't know. There might be another film taken at the same time.
Can I just ask you, sorry about this, are you getting a buzzing in your headset, Dyllis?
There is a slight buzzing, yes.
I've got a slight buzzing too. That shouldn't be happening either. Is yours too, Gillian? The assistant producer just said that she's got a buzzing in her headset too. Now, this should not be happening, yes? No, she's shaking her head. There's no reason for this to suddenly be happening.
I wonder if stones will suddenly fly across
Put your headphones on, Rodney. Have you got a slight buzzing?
Yes.
Now, this should not be happening. It should be absolutely silent. It should be completely... Because neither of my faders are up. And there's no reason for this buzzing to be here. Now listen, if you two would just like to carry on for the rest of the afternoon, I'm going. I am going. Now, Dyllis, you've written this book called...
Where they can't cope. The spirit takes over a part of them, or it just goes with them everywhere. And so, in order to make things better for everyone, it's best if you can send the spirit on to where it belongs. So therefore, rescue it, as it were.
Now, Rodney's nodding. You're into all this, aren't
you? Yes, I agree with what Davies is saying.
Now, you see, you know I'm a cynic, don't you? You know I'm a skeptic.
I think you're a lovely man, whatever you are. I don't mind any skeptics. There are plenty about. Because I'm psychic.
Really?
I know you're a lovely man.
How do you know that?
Well...
I'll be a fiend.
In disguise.
No, I don't think so.
Why did my switchboard not go funny the way it was in the...
Because you were on the air and you knew jolly well nothing should happen around you at work. This is all based a lot of subconscious too. I'm not saying anyone consciously did any of it, but if you had fire, flood or tempest or things falling down, you would stay at your desk and you'd see your show through.
Oh, I don't know about that, Dyllis. Okay, so that's Lost Spirits. What a star... You also have written your experiences with star children. What are star children?
Well, there are children or spirits from... again, we're going over into the aliens now, and the aliens that Rodney was talking... Is it Roddy or Rodney?
Roddy, yeah.
Roddy was talking of. I deal quite a bit with aliens and angel beings and so on, and the lost spirits come from some place, I don't know where. You have to take a lot on trust, and you have to work on different planes, mental planes with this. And they come from somewhere to do some sort of mission here. And I can only tell you they exist because I can recognize them. I can't tell you what they are or where they're from. I can tell them, and it greatly relieves a lot of them to know about it because they just don't understand why they're the way they are. They always want to go home. They know they don't belong here and they want to go home. But they've chosen to come here and do this thing, and they have silver, a sort of silver within, usually, that I can recognize.
Now, you also have contact with the dead. I know what that is.
Yeah.
Angels?
Yes, there is an angel in there. I haven't met many angels. I've met some angelic beings, and I can speak on to them. But there is one case I described where I actually saw in my... It was a dog, actually, a pet of a dear lady, friend of mine, and her dog, a great loved dog, had died, and she said, could I contact him? And I saw him just there as he was, always a big soppy dog, pushing a bit of white flower along with his nose, a few white flowers for her, and then suddenly I saw within my head, I have to add, not with my eyes, sort of rising like a shape which would go up like a laurel wreath goes up, and it formed something I've never ever seen before in that respect. And I said to her, he's like around you to protect you. He's like I couldn't even bring myself to say it, and she said, an angel. And I said, yes, he's like an angel. The wings, what people call wings, were just around her like that. Very loving. He'd gone, I think, joined, if one can accept it, into, apart from being himself, his soul had gone into the great soul of universal dog, was the only way I could describe it. And it was so beautiful, these wings. They were like, well, they weren't wings, but they were like feather, fog, mist, little bits of snowflake, all so very lovely. Now go on, everyone ring up and say she's gone off her head.
Okay.
Heaven in the sky.
Yeah. Now, I'm just moving down the list. Devils.
Yes.
Contact with devils.
Yes, I have not actually contacted the devil. Well, except in my own behalf, which was very long ago. I was very afraid. And completely satanic evil, I think, unless it is in the culture, as it is in other cultures, is not usually a thing one comes across very often, because a lot of that springs from the fear again. It all goes to the weak point, and that's the fear.
Mystics.
Oh, I know plenty of mystics.
I think I know what that means.
Yes.
Right. Now, as a clairvoyant, you can see true. What does that mean? Do you see images, or do you... how would you describe that, seeing true?
Well, the term clairvoyant, when you say a person is clairvoyant, it means you have not just five senses.
My buzzing has stopped.
And mine.
Was there a technical reason? No, it started again. I can still hear it again, sorry. Right, it started again. Yes, you can see true. So the meaning of the term clairvoyant?
Well, that is literally what term clairvoyant means. It means to see clear. And it means you see with other senses other than the five which we have. You can see things when people say, well, how do you know? I must add here, and I would like to say, a great many things that people claim are clairvoyant or psychic or anything are often not due to that. They're due to, you can, for instance, do a complete reading purely on psychological acumen, body language, and the other person's credibility. And I'm very well aware of that, as I'm sure are lots of people who are very sceptical about this. But
you could spin me a line just
I could do your reading without being a clairvoyant at all. Because a lot of people use that. I mean, con men can use that.
Right.
And I think on the stage often, I'm not saying anybody in particular, but you can use very, very great deal of... Once the person believes in a thing, you can use everything. They look, their body language, the way they move, little responses, you play on them. A lot of sort of fortune teller types of people, no offence to fortune tellers, but do that, or have done that. But the real clairvoyance is when you are able to use another power or draw the power down. The energy, again, it's all energy. It's all based on is great sort of energy. And then you just are able to tune in to other things and see things which are not in front of your eyes.
Well, I've got something spooky to tell you. I knew a friend of mine, whom I haven't seen for several years now. She, it turned out, after knowing, I knew her husband better than I knew her. I met her through her husband because he's a film editor, and an Australian film editor. And it turned out, after many years, that she read tarot cards. Do you read tarot cards?
I can read cards. Well, I don't read the cards. I use them with the clairvoyance as a focus for the clairvoyance. It's the same thing.
Right. And once I got to know her well, she keeps these things in silk. I take it that's the best thing to do. You keep it in some sort of silk with the colour you like, or anyway. And over a period of months, I mean months and months, she read my tarot card. Now, I don't believe in this, Dyllis, I have to say.
No.
She read my tarot cards 3 times and took Polaroid photographs of each time she read the cards. And they were roughly the same.
Yes.
It certainly had the same pattern and had the same ending. Now, that ending that she got 3 times in the tarot cards, read over a period of probably 18 months, was the same ending that I got from a Persian woman when I was in Iran during the revolution, a Persian woman read my coffee beans. She actually approached me, unsolicited, in the coffee bar of a hotel, and said, "Do you mind if I read your coffee?" Right, and she was a very well-dressed woman, not someone off the street looking for a buck or anything. In fact, she just told me what was going to happen, and then walked away. And I've never seen her before or since. And the ending in the tarot cards was the same as the ending that she gave me.
Well, that is exactly right, isn't it? I mean, if you're...
Well, I haven't ended yet. But I haven't reached that stage of my life yet.
If your cards or anything is done, or anything is done for you in that way, if the person is able to do it, well, then it's going to be exactly the same from everyone. There's nothing strange about that.
Well, I'll tell you what there is strange about it, Dyllis, is that what are the chances of that happening? I mean, they must be minuscule.
But they're not chance. If your future is there and someone turns to it and they're clairvoyant, they can pick it up. Whatever it is, it will be the same. If a person is clairvoyant, they'll pick the same thing up.
But,
yes, Rodney.
The other thing you have to remember is that you have to shuffle the tarot cards first before they're laid out into...
3 times?
Yes, before they're laid out into the spread. And what seems to be happening when the shuffle is going on is that you can, if you like, clairvoyantly sense the order into which the cards are falling. And when they arrange themselves into a pattern which is relevant to you and your life, that is when you're prompted to stop, to say you've shuffled them enough, and you give them to the reader, who then lays them out in the spread and interprets them. So this will explain why the 3 spreads were more or less the same.
Why am I still sceptical then? Why am I still a cynic? Why haven't I been...
Only you can answer that.
Yes, and also, I expect that what you were given for your future, I expect that you probably have, as we all have, decisions to make, and there are many alternative futures. You're probably likely to see the most likely future, although there are plenty of alternative ones if you took other decisions all along the way.
Right.
Would you agree with that, Roddy?
I think I would generally. It's a very moot point as to whether we have a fixed fate.
Yes.
Oh, that's it now. Do we have a fixed fate?
Well, I think I'm inclined to the view that the major events of our lives are fixed, but we have a lot of latitude around those. So the most important events, which determine the broad course of our life, like who you marry, which profession you go into, this sort of thing, tend to be, I think, fairly fixed. But things going on around there, we have some say in that.
Yes, my view on that would be, as a clairvoyant and mystic, that we are given our life pattern before we're born. We agree to come and we take it. We forget it when we're born. William Wordsworth's Ode on the Intimations of Immortality in Early Childhood is all about that, as are many great art pieces. So it's not only psychics who think of that. But when we have our lives, we think all the time we have free will. It's only, I think, at the end when we are dying or whatever, we look back and we're going to see it was all how it had to happen. But we did have free will. But at the same time, in some strange way, we had to choose as we did.
I'm not sure what's going on. Rodney Davies is with us. Rodney was spent between 11 and 12 telling us about Supernatural Disappearances, which is the same name as his book, which is out on Thursday. And Dyllis Gator joined us at high noon, midday. And Dyllis is the author whose latest book is a psychic's casebook, because Dyllis, apart from being an author, is also a practicing psychic.